Welcome to Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite.
Hey guys, Alicia with Working Dog Radio here again. I wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our newest sponsors, someone that we are super, super happy with and glad to have aboard, somebody that we have known since they literally got into the game. Aiden and Jesse from Rex Specs literally made a product so that they could enjoy life with their dog. Their dog suffered from pannus and they wanted to take their dog skiing, and they went out and they made goggles that fit their dog, and now they make products for your dog, my dog, and everybody's dog. And we've watched them grow, and we are so proud of them and proud to know them. All their products are American made. They are supporting us who support them. These goggles are UV protectant. They protect your dog's eyes from dust, from particles, from anything that could get in the way if you take your dog to the range. One of the products that Ted and I use most often is their Ear Pro. They have Canine Ear Pro. It pulls over your dog's head and it protects their ears. So if you go to the range, you're doing gunfire acclimation, whatever you're doing, those things work great. They have leashes. They have all kinds of cool stuff. You really need to check them out. And we are very glad to have them aboard and very proud of their products. We do have some. We will give some away. Keep watching for us. If you check them out on the socials, it's at Rex Specs, S-P-E-C-S, the letter K, the number 9, and also rexspecs.com. If you use the discount code Working Dog Radio, all one word and all lowercase, you'll get 20% off your first order.
All right, Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite. We are back on. We're recording this on Easter. So, I am Ted Summers from Tulsa, Oklahoma. With me from Canton, Ohio, always is Eric Stambro. What's up?
Yeah, recording on Easter, which was ultimately, I think, is the one I suggested. Did not go over well. So, but luckily my wife doesn't feel very good, so she's just sitting downstairs. So, Dothan, Alabama, doing my e-collar without conflict seminar. I'm only home. I got back yesterday. I'm home today. I leave tomorrow for Houston. Down to Houston Canine Academy with Jason and Jazz. They've both been guests on the show. Come back for a couple of days, Myrtle Beach for the Hold the Line conference.
Yeah.
Then I come back for a couple of days and Penn Vet over in Philadelphia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, then back for a couple of days, Indiana, Illinois. It's just on and on and on. I just booked Rhode Island.
Yeah, we booked our HRD shit out through the rest of the year. So we're for the most part through the rest of the year. So, and I've got some stuff that I'm doing with the Oklahoma Sheriff's Association and the Oklahoma Chiefs of Police Association at their conferences. And we've got a couple of other projects with the with the Oklahoma Sheriff's guys. So yeah, I'm just rocking and rolling doing handler schools.
You got one starting soon, right?
Starts on the 8th. They pick all their dogs up tomorrow first, take them home for a week of bonding, and then come back. And I've got teams from 3 states in this class, so should be interesting. Should be a good time. So. And then we've got more dogs coming in mid-April. So for my April and May, it'll be for my June, like mid-June through mid-July class. So I'm getting 12 dogs in or something, so we'll fucking add to the list.
Yep.
Yeah. What are you doing?
So when we were at Hits, you guys, if you went back and listened, we got 4, 5, 6 episodes. We like to at these seminars try to get 5 or 6 episodes.
But they're short.
They are. That's the problem.
Right.
Like we like it because we're in the room with each other and with the guest, and it seems to flow a little bit more naturally, I think, when we're in those rooms together. However, we try to keep them around a half hour, maybe 40 minutes. And a lot of times we'll use that to get a guest on that we haven't had or that we've had before, like somebody's instructing. But so when the first day we got there, and I think we talked about it in the episode, I'm sitting out at the pool with Billy Sawyer and a bunch of guys from Colorado, and I meet DJ Holmes there, and him and I just start talking. We should have been sitting in the water drinking,
Man,
something
it was
with an
hot.
umbrella.
It was
but
hot
our
shit,
dumbasses were talking about dogs. So what are you going to do? So we started talking, and I'm like, man, this dude's really interesting. And everybody that was with him on the side was like, hey, dude, this is the dude. You got to talk to this guy. Like, he's like thinking on a different level than a lot of the guys that are around him. And so we had DJ on an episode, talked mostly about science and where it falls in, and how science should prove our work, not the other way around, I think was the thing. But one of the things he said in that interview, and I said this should be a class or a full long episode, was he said, man, I've been chasing the false response for 30 years or whatever the number was. And I was like, that sounds like an amazing episode and possibly even something you should probably teach at a class. So we said we were going to have him on for a longer full episode. So with us again is Darren DJ Holmes. DJ, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me again, gentlemen.
Yeah. How's things out in the mountains?
Spring's kind of showing its face. We had a heavy snowstorm a couple weeks ago. We've got a couple feet of snow, so still trying to clean up from that mess. But training dogs, staying busy. Had a back surgery, so kind of slowly recovering from that, but everything's good. So
yeah, what would you have to repair?
I herniated a disc in L5 pretty bad, and that crippled me up. So luckily, I already had a back surgeon in my pocket from a previous episode, so he cleaned everything up and just kind of on the road to recovery. Light duty status right now, but I'm still training dogs and staying active. So
cool. So in the we'll briefly just remind people who you are and what you do. I know if you go back and listen, you can hear he started in hunting dogs back in the day, and I've always said that hunting dog people, if you really want to learn a lot of stuff, you should pony up with some of them guys. They just truly understand it with dogs, and they're typically not training one or two dogs at a time. They usually have a lot. A big kennel full of dogs, and just rinse and repeat over and over and over again. I know the, Pat Nolan started in hunting dogs and was in it forever. And he does so much stuff with the military directionals, hand this and that, all the stuff he does.
Yeah, we've said for a long time that if you want to learn how to use an e-collar, go hang out with hunting dog guys. We had Freddie King on, was another guy that's just like, every time I talk to him, I'm like, I need to forget how much I don't know. That dude, talking to Freddie is another one. I'm just like, God damn, dude. But I mean, it's what he does every day, all day. So he's got 60 fucking kennels over there. But,
yeah, I was just in Alabama, and there were some Army guys there, and they were doing some off-leash directional stuff from a program that they have in the Army. Not everybody gets to go through it. Some do, some don't. And it's based off of Pat Nolan. Pat taught and developed the program and went from there. So did that for a while, did the military contracting thing for quite a bit with was the Marine Corps, and then switched into law enforcement. What have you been doing since we talked to you, Dogwise?
So I had two, we started as a puppy program, and I had two puppies that we trained from 8 weeks. One of them ended up not working out, so we kind of placed her, but the other dog is now certified. We did certify him on fentanyl. So he's one of the dogs out here that has that in his training. And then just keeping him operational. I've been through a handful of prison facilities. Fremont County out here is pretty unique. We've got kind of the highest concentration of prison systems in the world. So there's a lot of facilities out here, and from time to time they'll ask us to, give them a hand. So really just was doing that before this injury happened. So now I'm just kind of, maintaining training and getting up, making sure all the buttons are working and showing him more training areas and all of the things we should be doing to progress our dogs. Right. So.
Yeah. I think in the first time you were on, we even discussed, should you or shouldn't you imprint on fentanyl? I think that was part of the do we or don't we?
That was part of the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. So far in Ohio, I think there's some prison dogs and some jail dogs that are doing it, but I don't know a lot because it's not part of the certification yet. You would have to go get certified somewhere else. Are you seeing a lot of places in Colorado doing it?
When I first started, there was one other agency that I certified with on that day, and I think since then there's probably, I know a lot of the other certifying organizations out here adding that to their their list of odors. So I'm assuming there's probably quite a few now in Colorado, and I haven't caught wind of any repercussions legally at this point. So
that was always our problem, right? Like, because it's still not a schedule. It's not a Schedule 1. And
I think feds it is now.
Is it? Okay.
I think so.
But, I can't, and this is what I've said from the beginning, is like, I can't imagine the series of events that would have to happen where you build up enough reasonable suspicion on an 80-year-old grandma driving a minivan or an old Cadillac that you get the dog out to run and get a positive indication, and you find out she has a fentanyl patch for her with an actual script. Like, I just don't know. I mean, I'm sure like weirder things have definitely happened like this month, but and that's always been kind of the thing, that and touching it. Like, no one wants to touch it. So it's like, I think we've kind of had, like, from two directions we've dealt with, like the legal side, like where everybody's kind of hinky on it, and then the safety side too, like maintenance training and then actual imprinting and training. Like, nobody wants to touch it. So I think that's been kind of a hiccup for a lot of people.
If somebody made a movie of my life, Nobody Wants to Touch It would probably be the name of the
movie. There was some creativity in the process and how it was applied. And, that's probably another discussion in itself. But I'm happy with the results. There's obviously a lot of discrimination training that needs to go through that process. Finding out that, some of the mixtures with the fentanyl definitely have a unique odor profile in themselves. But there's also components in it that need to be separated out. So
is your fentanyl all cartel, or is it from China, or do you guys know where it's coming from?
Well, so the way I did it was, I've got pure fentanyl. So utilizing the TAD devices and safely doing that was kind of the first stage of it, as well as some of the products that are out there that are, not hazardous, obviously. And then that kind of moved into kind of the more of the street, the stuff you're finding on the street. So
Can you smell it? I've never fucked with fentanyl. Like, you can smell cocaine, you can weed, obviously. Yeah, no, I mean,
in actuality, the amount that I have is so small and minuscule. I wouldn't, even in a TAD, I'm not going to put my nose to it, but it doesn't seem to have, any scent to me, or odor to it to me. So
Ted, I forgot to tell you, I got this email the other day from the state of Ohio, from OPATA, the Ohio Police Officers Training Academy. And so they're making everybody who's a state evaluator get a retraining. I think it's 8-hour. You have to go to this class in the state before by the end of this year, or you can't renew your certificate. Now, my evaluator certificate is up next month, but I think I'm going to let it go. I don't really need it. But the funny thing is, there's 4 or 5 classes for the entire year for the state, and I believe all but one is already sold out within hours. There was a lot of people that were given a head notice, and that's how they were able to get into it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to eliminate civilians who are evaluators, meaning they used to be cops and now they're not cops anymore, and they're still sticking around and doing evaluations, and then trying to cut down the number of evaluators. But there's changes. The reason why they're making you do this, there's changes. One of which is they're taking out the aggression to gunfire, which I've been complaining about. All of us have been complaining about for fucking years. Yeah. So the way Ohio used to be, or the decoy fires, takes off running, and when the dog is halfway to you, he fires again, and the dog has to aggress the decoy. Now what they're going to do is it's going to be a false start with gunfire, where the handler has to fire and the dog can't move. The dog's got to stay there, which is cool. However, you're going to have 6, 7, 8-year-old street dogs certified 5, 6 times on that gunfire. And there's going to be some handlers getting fucked up trying to teach this 5-year-old man on a leash, how to not turn and bite it. Because there's a lot of guys who I've told over the years when we've done gunfire stuff. I'm like, I hope you're a really good shot, and your first 2 double tap rounds hits that dude, because the next set of rounds you're going to be wearing your dog. There was no reason for a lot of trainers to work on gunfire neutrality because the state wanted you to attack it. It was really weird. But the other thing that I think they're going to do is, marijuana is recreational legal here. There are still agencies that have marijuana dogs that want to use them for schools and jails, right? They're giving you the option to certify on weed or obviously not. But I think, by what I read, and I don't know until the first people go to the class, I think they're going to have you put weed in a room and your dog has to walk it. So,
really? They're going to do the
certification.
The interesting. We've talked about that here in Oklahoma. And of course, when we had Steve Antomarchi on, there was some conversation about that, and they do that, and they do differentiate the hip. Everybody's listened to that episode. If not, go back and listen to it. In fact, he's instructing at Blue Line too. The anti-things, you start going down. The problem I've always had with that is going down the road of, why didn't you add this? 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 Right? So I think that kind of opens a door that I don't think we want to answer questions to, but that's just me. So
let's talk about real quick, because this is going to be a detection related episode. Talk about what your job was with the Marine Corps when you were doing those contracts.
So initially I started out as a trainer, and then that kind of moved into the instruction piece when you get assigned to classes that come in. But the FSR position, that field service representative position, basically you get attached to a battalion and you're the subject matter expert for your dogs and your handlers. After the initial handlers course, you may get the option to do 2 weeks of additional training. And then from there, you do pre-deployment training. And that was 5 or 6 weeks, I think. And then from there, when you deployed, you were the man in the hot seat for the canine support, from handlers to the dogs to the kennel, you name it. It was a pretty high level of support from that position. Obviously, dog programs are quite different than a lot of the other standard FSR positions that are out there. They have mechanics and guys that, worked on the blimps and you name it. But the dog piece was a lot more intricate, right? Yeah, that's where kind of the rubber meets the road. And, you had to make sure that when you got there, your dogs had to certify when they got in country. That was typically the first process. And then from there, it was, from my experience, everyone's FSR experience is kind of different based on the level of support they had from their battalions. Mine was, I was very fortunate to have a very proactive battalion. I supported the Combat Engineer Battalion, and so route clearance was the primary mission. Every day they're out there, they're pretty much doing the same job, and that's hunting IDs.
If I remember right, you had from get a dog in till certification, you had 70 days. Was that right?
Yeah, initially on the procurement piece to get them certified before handler school, it was, I think, around 70 days to get them certified. And I guess the caveat that from the last episode, we were procuring dogs that had some level of retriever training attached to them. So they already had basic handling skills, basically, or whatever. So it wasn't like we were having to build that from the beginning. But there was a wide variety of, that skill set based on the availability of dogs. So
yeah, that's nice. And we're lucky, Ted and I are getting dogs in from Europe. They're green. They know sit usually. Some don't. And you get a dog out of Hungary, the dog's not going to know anything.
Some of them have never seen a fucking leash.
No, well, but they at least know they at least can hunt a ball. They'll throw it. They've done some of that stuff, a little bit of bringing them out. And so they're not just like straight off of a farm and straight into the van. I mean, being shown something. So, and you guys were working the safe standoff stuff with your dogs?
Yeah, so that contract was exclusively labs. That was the capability that they wanted, that safe standoff distance. So directional handling with obviously the detection piece.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be super interesting, like a lot of work, but very satisfying. So we're going to go ahead and take our first commercial break. When we get back, we're going to get into the meat of what this episode is about: chasing the false response. We'll talk a lot about training, what guys are doing wrong, what DJ's seen over the years, where he's landed on a lot of different things, and go from there, see where that takes us. So stick around, guys. Check out the show notes for the discount codes. We got great sponsors on there. Remember, Ray Allen has a new discount code because you guys burned up and wore out the first one. And RexPex is a new sponsor. I know I'll tell you, Ted. So when I was just down in Alabama, we use kibble for training, and I had been using Royal Canin because A, it's right here, and B, they're big pieces, like they're, a large piece. Well, Royal Canin now is like $120 fucking a bag. So when I was there, Kinetic's been a sponsor for a long time. We feed a lot of Kinetic, but they have, a little bit smaller kibble. So I hadn't been using them for the training piece. But now they came out with a new formula. It's a 27K, they call it, which is their 27 grams. And I think also they're getting rid of the K designation. They said it's kind of confusing people, but they're 27K. It's a regular food. It's a really good food. You can feed all the time, but they made the pieces in this like bigger wafer size. And dude, for training, they were fantastic. Because if you throw the piece to work on recall, you throw it out there, they can hear it and they can see it. And then you only have to give them one on the way back, not like smaller kibble where you're giving them a few and it's going through your fingers and they're licking your hands. And
we have a food that I'm feeding right now for some of the dogs, and the kibbles are like the size of peas. Like it sucks for food training. It's terrible.
Kinetic is taking care of that. Dude, I really liked it. We went through a lot of it. And the dogs, and it's a beef and bacon flavor. So
Did you try it?
I licked a couple of pieces off the floor, but no, it was actually didn't smell. I thought I'd smell the bacon stuff. Didn't really smell at all. It didn't seem to be greasy. That's the other complaint on Royal Canin. It's very greasy. But Royal Canin only makes theirs in a chicken. As far as the bigger pieces go. And as you know, some dogs have issues with the chicken, and then the fish formula stinks and I can't stand it. So this beef and bacon should take care of all that. So check it out. It's available now. You can get their 27K formula, and it's great for feeding and training. So anyways, we'll be right back.
Ray Allen Manufacturing is one of our longest relationships that we've had. Especially me. I'm just kidding. We love Ray Allen. They are everything dog. And I don't care if you have a pet, the tiniest pet, all the way up to the gnarliest canine. These guys make it. They manufacture their stuff. Matt said back their hands sewing things. We've seen it. They invent products. They collaborate with other trainers who think that they might have a product that the world needs to see, and they'll make it. They are awesome to work with. They are innovative. They are professional. They are fantastic to work with. Every one of Torchlight's dual purpose dogs goes with an icon vest. They're fantastic. We order from them all the time. If you guys are looking for a discount code for Ray Allen, please go to rayallen.com and use RAM WDR, all caps. That's RAM WDR for 10% off. And check out the line of muzzles that I make specifically for them. I think you'll like them.
All right, everybody, we are back. Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite. I'm Eric Stambro with my co-host Ted Summers and our guest Darren Holmes. I can't remember when you were on the first time what we were talking about, when you said, man, I've been chasing that false response for whatever, 20, 30 years, whatever the number was.
A long time.
Yeah, long time. Let's start all the way back to when you were training early on, working dog, training, and then you were like, man, I got to figure out what the fuck causes some of this stuff.
Sure. So really, doing the contracting piece and working with a lot of dogs, there was almost 650 dogs in that program at one point in time. And when I got to do part of the 2.0 program, obviously we were selecting some of the best dogs that were in the program, pulling them aside to do some scientific stuff and training. And then we were also starting a new batch of green dogs. So kind of applying lessons learned and watching kind of that mass production process, on how odor was being taught. And then, a lot of the dogs that had already been deployed, they had a number of exposures, obviously a very high reward history with target odor. Trying to select the best dogs and going through those processes, I got to witness a lot of training issues that, didn't really work for the accuracy piece of being operational. And so that really just through multiple observations and then obviously trying to clean up those issues. That's that's how I learned a lot of this stuff. And so it was remediation training, identifying issues, and then the remedial processes to correct that. So, had I not had that experience with that many dogs and in a different position, then I may not be, in the thought processes that I am now. But, ultimately, false response behavior, in my opinion, exists because of the way we train. It's a side effect of how we teach dogs. So there's some lack of clarity or conflict in discrimination training that produces that.
Just so everyone listening to this is on the same page, and maybe we have some newer handlers or some new detection trainers or whatever, let's kind of classify what a false response is so that everybody listening to this knows what the fuck we're talking about.
Sure. I mean, if you want the technical term kind of from the swig dog deal, right? In a controlled environment, the dog responds if a trained substance was present when it is known that it is not, right? So in scientific terms, that's a false response and or a false positive.
And we often call it soliciting too. So I kind of use them interchangeably, false response and solicitation. And during our handler schools, we spent a lot of time with our guys kind of watering that down until like third grader English, where I just he's going to lie to you. And when he lies to you, this is what it looks like. So each individual dog. And, we go through the whole thing about how you create that false response, or how you create a false alert or false response or solicitation or the handlers. Because like you said, it's how we train dogs. And I think kind of in the background, I knew that this was always a problem because, from the legal side, right? Like what's for 30 years, fucking defense attorneys have been using recycled, stupid arguments that rarely work. But the number one thing that I hear all the time is that the dog alerts and he was cued, right? Like he's cued, he's been cued. And I hear it all the time. And I don't even think a lot of attorneys understand what they're saying. And on top of that, a lot of times I think handlers create these cues that they don't realize that they're doing, and inadvertently, I don't think anyone sets out. I don't think any handler sets out, with the exception of some search and rescue handlers. That's a different conversation. Actively set out to create this problem. But inadvertently, and one of my buddies, Anthony Moore, who's one of our state certifiers, said it the other day while we were towards the end of one of my classes. The hardest thing for a narcotics handler to do is admit that there's nothing there. And he's like, it's really hard especially for new handlers to not see any change of behavior on a vehicle and then just be like, okay, it's not there. There's nothing there. So just so everybody's on the same page, the dog gives us a final response when there's no presence of target odor. That's what a false means. Okay. Sorry. Because I had somebody ask me that the other day, and I was like, if somebody's going to listen to this, we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
So let's break down the training piece into two sections so we don't get kind of trailing off. The first section, let's do just the dog side of it. We'll add the handler piece into the second section. The first section of the dog soliciting a response or where does that fall apart in training of just the dog?
So you guys are going to have to kind of keep me in the lanes here because,
gotcha.
To me, this is a very elaborate discussion. But I guess maybe for clarity initially here, I think that one of the biggest things from the training aspect of it is that a lot of trainers don't really understand contextual learning. And that absolutely applies pretty much anytime you're training the dog. And training the dog, if you understand the contextual learning piece of it, you're training the dog by the way that they learn and not creating a humanized thought process to create training, right? You're actually training the dog in front of you. You understand the way that they learn and you're shaping behaviors based off of that. So that kind of is a long, elaborate discussion, but in essence, contextual learning, right, is the interrelated conditions in which something exists or occurs. So things that are interrelated. Anytime we're rewarding or marking behaviors, there's a lot of things that are included in that. That doesn't just mean target odor.
I often tell handlers and new detection trainers, and it kind of falls in what you're talking about here, that dogs are like the best scorekeepers on the planet. And they either win or they lose in every interaction and every detection problem. And there is no tie. So they're either going to fall back to a reward history and reward schedule with the behaviors that they've been successful in the past for shaping, or they're going to do something that will get them to the end goal, whatever it is, which is lying to you. So they're like, and I think a lot of that gets lost in the mud. Like when we listen to some other detection trainers that are really known for it, they're like, odor pays, right? Like that's the big thing that's been going around recently is odor pays, odor pays, odor pays. And I think we just like say shit like that without there being a lot of, I see people say odor pays, but when I watch them training, I'm like, the odor is not paying here. The dog is not fucking stupid. Like they know exactly where they're being paid and what they're being paid with and where it's coming from and how it works. When I've had dogs solicit like bad or false or whatever term we're using here, I've traced it back to poor imprinting. Part of it. To poor imprinting with the handlers in terms of whatever imprinting process they use. So talk a little bit about that procedure or that process and like how we start new dogs down the road of not likely going to give us a negative response on odor or a false response on odor, I guess.
Sure. Well, the interesting thing about teaching target odor or the imprinting piece, is we're asking a dog to generalize. And in doing that, right, there's a lot of ways that inherently you set that up that you're probably rewarding cognitive functions in that process. So initially we need a dog to generalize quite a bit, and then we're going to mark those behaviors. But in that process, again, there's a lot of things that are tied into it. If you think from a law enforcement side, right, on the use of force stuff, if you talk about totality of circumstances, that would be a very good comparison of when we start training, how the dog's thinking, right? It's not just we put out odor, the dog smells it, and we mark that behavior, right? The cues and the processes from the start of that training session are almost always being captured, right? We're creating sequences leading to reward within our search behavior. So if you can separate that stuff out, and kind of reverse engineer those processes, that would be how you get the remediation piece. From the foundational teaching process, I do it very, very differently. And if that's what you're asking about, I can kind of go down that path a little bit. And I can give you an example on this last, couple dogs that I went through this process with, and I like the results just on how it's been done and changing my training for probably the last 10 years playing around with multiple different dogs and the processes. But so I actually teach an offered behavior, the final response through an offered behavior. I spend a lot of time just shaping search behavior before we ever get to odor. I'm going to really, really refine all of the cues that I want in search behavior, meaning swinging off my body, right? When I turn, you turn, keeping a very detailed search, not letting them go kind of naturally hasty the way they want to, right? Recalling and getting a high sniff frequency and duration. And there's a number of ways you can do that. It's probably more popular now than it used to be. But I take the time in shaping that behavior right down to the final indication. And I shape steadiness and duration before they get to odor. It transfers over really, really easy when they understand that process. So I typically identify my rewards. I'll have at least a primary and a secondary reward. The primary is going to be associated with target odor. The secondary is going to be associated with self-rewarding search behavior, meaning this reward, when you find it out in the search environment, you self-reward, you bring it back, and you get a little bit of arousal and stimulus from the way I interact with you on that. But it is self-rewarding in the search environment. That's going to help keep your search behavior intact through longer durations without having to use odor constantly, which is what creates biases, which is what affects accuracy.
I think for better or for worse, there is a ton of emphasis put on trained final responses in our industry, whether it's on the military side, law enforcement side, or even on the AKC like odor, like the little AKC odor titles, which are
The
kind of
scent
cool
work
for
stuff.
yeah. And even in there, the TFR, the final responses when the dog is at target odor, we put a ton of time and emphasis on that. And when I run trainer schools and I have new handlers, I remind them that there isn't a single dog on this planet that gets washed out of a detection program for their inability to identify target odor. We wash them because they won't look for it, or they give up too easily at looking for it. And I watch dudes all the time. People build elaborate fucking contraptions. I'm no different, like walls and fucking poppers and all kinds of crazy shit to get this trained final response. And I've had dudes sell me dogs that are like, this dog is quote unquote done. And he's a monster on 4 boxes with poppers in it. But the motherfucker acts like he is Helen Keller if I take those boxes away. Like he can't see, hear, or think for anything. And I'm like, this dog is great on poppers, right? But the minute that we have and I try and explain it, I was like, you haven't taught the dog to search. Like you haven't taught him to hunt. And that is why I had a dog I just washed out of our detection program here. She was a monster if she could see the ball. The minute the ball went away, she's like, meh, I don't know. Right? And she has quote unquote drive, but she's just like, man, I don't really want to look for it. I'm like, nope, not today. So
I have one of those in my house. That's why she's in my house.
Jesse. Exactly. Jesse. So, and down to what you're saying too is, you've got your primary and your secondary. And I had a conversation. I was in Arkansas 2 weeks ago, training with some of the people from handlers from Fort Smith. And one of the handlers has a dog that gets loaded big time tracking, right? And it's because there's a reward history for tracking, right? At the end of the track, they always fucking bite somebody, which we've talked this at length. Not all the tracks are going to be successful. So there needs to be some variability on that one too, just like we do blanks and detection work. But I told the handler, I said, if the dog is tracking well, like if he's got his head down and he's trickety tracking along, just throw his fucking tug over his head and play with him out and recast him. And you'll bleed some of that off. So I think because we place so much emphasis on this like terminal mark or this terminal thing, like the sit and the stare and the tracking side, like finding the person we're looking for, pre-proximity alert stuff. Like I think a lot of like what you're talking about gets lost in the wash, like the actual act of hunting, the actual act of tracking, the actual act of looking for odor and being successful at that component piece is where we wash dogs and where I see problems most of the time.
Yeah, and it really comes into play with dogs that have to work for long periods of time, that duration piece, right? That's really the disciplines where you're going to see it. If you're just running your car on traffic stops all the time, you're probably not going to see it, but that in itself, just by repetition creates issues as well because of the context of how you're doing it. So being conscious of really biasing a reward history is another huge issue of why false responses occur, right? We've got so much reward history with this sequence of behavior, right? I need to go out and search. I need to go out and stick my head in a box. I need to stick my head in a pipe, and that's been reinforced 1,000 times, right? Once you've done that, it's extremely hard to go back and remediate that stuff because you've created that expectation in your sequences leading to reward. Objects, items, vehicles, people, any sort of bias that you create with reward history, you have to then go back and make sure that that's not the reason that these dogs are going to respond. And that's part of the reverse engineering process. So inherently, to get good search behavior, you have to create reward history, right? And so you need to be kind of smart in the approach to doing that. So you're not creating a bias. If you're losing search motivation, then clearly, you can increase your reward history. But I don't do that with target odor 100% of the time.
Which is a whole other conversation about variable reward schedules and how it increases drive.
And I do use variable rewards in scheduling. I think that's a huge part of maintaining the search motivation. And if you understand markers and cues, it is very valuable when you're actually building these sequences leading to reward. Those markers have value in training, if you're applying it that way, saying, oh, hey, he gave me this verbal marker, or hey, here's a discrimination piece in the training setup. Those are all markers potentially leading to that end reward, but you have to structure it in that fashion so the dog understands it. And going back to the indication piece, I prefer to have an indication, right? I'm not going to use odor to get this super crazy focus unless it's a discipline that requires that. I just need the dog to tell me that this is the behavior you understand you're supposed to do when you find target odor. The reason that that's important to me is because when I provide a high level of discrimination training, I want the dog to, after a change of behavior, discriminate and tell me yes or no. I don't want to just, in some situations, I may call it on the alert or change of behavior, but that would have to be an environmental impact to do that. Dogs will throw a change of behavior for 1,000 things, and they'll really throw those changes of behavior because of the associated scent and odors that have been provided through them through 1,000 reward histories and training with target odor, right? So you're going to get me off the road here because these things kind of collide. But really, in what I have coined kind of the ODCAD discrimination training process. So ODCAD is an acronym for odor and scent discrimination and contextual association drills. And this is really the reverse engineering part of identifying where the training has kind of gone sideways and your bias in reward histories have been created. So the first part of that is really what is included in the scent picture, right? When we actually imprint dogs or when we're doing maintenance training. So that goes right down to your containment pieces and any contamination that is present when we're teaching or reinforcing target odors, right? So this is proofing and the generic term. This is one piece of that. And I don't like proofing because I think it's generic. Really, this is cognitive discrimination training that you're performing. And through that process, you're going to align search criteria very specifically, right? Just to target odor. That's what we want. So in the associated scent pieces of it, right, you've got your Tupperware, you've got your glass, your cotton bags, all that stuff, right? This is pretty basic when it comes to the proofing, I think, and the understanding of it. But those are odors that are present or scents that are present when we reward the target odor, right? Their nose is that good, they're going to have that attached to the target odor. So if you're soaking towels, if you're using plastic, if you're putting your odor in cotton bags or plastic bags, that's all going to be part of that odor profile you're reinforcing. So we need to separate those out.
I have a funny story. I was watching a group of explosive handlers train on a very large agency, and they were practicing for their NORT test. So they had their HME shit out, and I was watching them and how they're doing it. So they have their jar, right? And then they've got a coffee filter over the top of it, and then they use rubber bands, right? So individually they had rubber bands, clean coffee filters, and the rubber gloves like independently to like proof off of. But I sat there and watched them because, most of that HME stuff is either a clear liquid or it's a white powdery substance. And unless you deal with it, like I can't tell from just looking at one or the other which is which. So they would take a Sharpie and write what was on top of the coffee filter. And I kind of watched them for a little bit and I was like, watch this. And so we pulled all the live odor out, left all the distractor odors out, and I just put a blank one out with a fucking coffee
Sharpie marker in it
and drew a dick on it. And every single one of the dogs hammered it. Because in the absence of any other target odor, they all looked at me and was like, you have a dick detection dog now. And they were like, how the fuck? And I was like, because I'm standing here watching you guys, you're fucking writing on it. I was like, how long have you been doing this? And their training sergeant was like, for years. I'm like, yeah. He was like, well, that's how we keep them separated. I'm like, there's probably another way to do that. That's a little cleaner. But he was like, fuck, I didn't even think about it. I'm like, dude, I can smell a Sharpie.
Right.
So this is, yeah.
One of the inherent things that's created through training, right? And it starts really at the beginning of it. So, I've gone to, when I teach target odor, and I can tell you on this last group of dogs, I put out three quantities of the same odor, 3 different thresholds. They were in the same container, and I like to use glass with metal screens. I think they have probably less of an odor that's present than some of the other items. So I initially used that. After the first reinforcement of target odor, on the second and third, I visually observed odor recognition. Okay. So one reinforcement literally produced odor recognition with these dogs. Okay. So they go to the second one, change of behavior, they get to it, reward. They go to the third one, change of behavior, they get reward. That was it for day one. The following day, I put out blank containers in the exact same locations, in the exact same environment we're in the day previously, no target odor, and both of those dogs went to the exact same places and falsed on every one of them.
Object permanence, baby. They're like goldfish.
That's it. So there's that, right? There's that contextual association piece of it, right? It's an object, right? It's the location, right? And although I observed odor discrimination, that tells you that yes, there was odor tied to it, but there's also a huge cognitive piece tied to it too, because of the way that we've provided that training. So I introduced the cognitive discrimination pieces immediately. I don't just do 8 odors for a month. It's literally the day after they get the first piece of it, they're going into cognitive discrimination training. The next time they get odor, it's going to be in a different container, and I like to use a variety of stuff, right? Moss containers, metal, plastic, paper, you name it, right? Everything that you can think of. And that threshold is going to vary through that process as well. And really what that does, in my opinion, I don't think there's any studies behind it, but really that starts a generalization process in itself, because you're not making them an expert at one thing, right? They're getting a variety right off the bat.
Yeah, in our imprinting phase, from the very beginning, we have 4 boxes out. Well, I don't start it that way. They start on a single with the target odor. But by the time they're running through, and I like to pull them off of poppers as soon as possible to get them to hunt. But during that process, in one box we'll have tobacco, and another box will have, and these are narcotics dogs, we'll have other stuff like prescription drugs that are, you can buy like over the counter, like Benadryl and like whatever shit in there. And then another one will have the actual dog food that we use for the rewards in their obedience and some of the tracking, and ask them to discriminate. I mean, from the get-go, each box has its own popper in it. So we're not dealing with that. And each box will also have reward toys in it. So we have a combination of odors. So I'm asking them from the beginning to look and identify target odor. And so pretty much every time they're running like easy lockers, cars, whatever, they've got tobacco out. They've probably run tobacco 1,000 times by the time they get handed off to their handler. And, you know, during our in-service trainings, I don't tell the handlers this, but they always have, well, at the end of the day, I do. They have a bunch of target odor, or a bunch of like distractor odor out too, whether it's food, tobacco, Crown Royal bags.
Yeah, we have a whole shirt with a Crown Royal bag on it. So do you find, like, if you're a kennel and you're prepping dogs, you know, imprinting dogs, do you find that it's because they don't know, they don't care, or they're just going too fast?
As far as foundational trainings provided.
Yeah, and creating those issues.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, the dogs don't inherently come out just false responding, right? Like, it's a residual effect of how we're providing training. And that really goes down to kind of understanding the contextual learning piece of it. So, you know, the objects, the items, whatever you're creating a reward history with, you need to be very creative in how you're setting that up, because if you over bias it, there's not clarity there. So you need to go back and kind of recreate your training and how it's been provided to identify those issues. And then that gets into the whole process of, you know, how you're going to mark behaviors, and when they false, what do you do, and all that type of stuff, which there's a lot of theories on that, and different people do it different ways. But realistically, you know, when we get to a point where we're doing discrimination training and a dog has false based off of a controlled setup that I've done, I need the dog to make a decision, right? And that decision is independently recover and go to your default behavior, which is search, right? If I tell it what to do, and in some instances early on when you're in discrimination training, I may help them out with like a no, or hunt it up, cue them up to get back to the business. But ultimately, I need that to be an organic decision, right? They need to understand that this does not produce reward. and then I need to keep searching to find what I'm supposed to be looking for. And that really is search criteria, right? That's creating the criteria that you want.
Right.
Do you figure that out? Do you have them figured out by waiting them out?
Typically, yes, I will wait out until they make that decision. And then when they continue to search and they're away from where that distractor was or whatever the setup was, transfer sent, whatever I set up in that scenario, I'm going to just mark it and say, good. Put a verbal marker on it. Good. You made the correct decision. Now we're moving on and we're searching again. Keep going.
Now, in that transition, have you ever paid the sniff? Like when you waited, they move, head snap on the actual target odor, or you just always wait for that final there, like the whole entire loop?
Oh, okay. So I guess caveat, I thought you were talking about on the discrimination piece. And in teaching the target odor, I will start with pay on the change. Yes.
Yeah, pay on change is super powerful, and they learn real fast. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other side of it is if you've already taught that and shaped that final response behavior, it takes about 2 reinforcements on odor before they're offering it. It's that fast.
It's in one session. Like that's how I add odors.
And there's no conflict. There's no human interaction per se. You're always going to kind of refine and shape the behavior once you get that to a certain extent, and then your criteria kind of leading into the reward sequencing piece, right? Like how you're rewarding. That just, if you're consistent about that, that's where they understand that's what they need to do.
I was going to say, I want to give everyone listening to this, like if you're kind of dealing with some of that right now, what DJ and I are both talking about is not necessarily waiting for the final response, but we're paying them on a change of behavior on this new target odor. And the issue then becomes, you got to be really careful, because then they're like, well, shit, anything novel now could be a potential target odor. So you have to be real, like Johnny on the spot. And at the kennel, like where we do all of our training and imprinting, we have nominal or novel odors, and we use kind of the similar ones in specific areas. So we all know where those are at, like during the early phases. But at this point, the dog's like, I've never smelled this before. It must be a new target odor. I'm going to solicit.
And when you're teaching target odor, right, that is when they're very malleable, right? Like that's what they're supposed to be doing, is finding out what is going to pay them and what is not, right? But if we don't continue to do that later consistently in training, then our search criteria is kind of wide open. If you're asking the dog to generalize for mixtures of odors, you need to be reinforcing exactly what you want. So that's a natural process that they're going to go through. And you see it a lot during the imprinting phase, as well as a high level of observation of human behavior through that process.
Yeah, we'll get into that one after the break.
God damn it.
Yes. So that's where you're going to get into these cues, right? And potentially creating cues that you don't want, but it's also a great time to create the cues that you do want. And if you've already more or less shaped the ones that you want during teaching search behavior, it transfers over really, really nice. And you're just marking yes or no.
So this kind of dovetails on part of the conversation we had with Steve Antomarchi. And Eric was making comments about some trainers in Ohio. Like, now that weed is recreational, right? People are freaking out. Every time it becomes recreational in the state, they think that they're unique and that the rest of the country that's already gone recreational hasn't already had to work through this. So, in their infinite wisdom, somebody in Ohio decides that they're going to proof a dog off in 10 days is what they're saying?
No, I didn't even hear a day.
All right, it's a super fast time, right? So effectively what they're doing is putting a dog on an e-collar. When he alerts on marijuana, they're just frying him. And my initial comment is kind of like, if this dog is 5 years old, let's say he's 6 years old, which means he's been certified through a PATA 5 times on marijuana, what is his reward? How many fucking times has he been rewarded? Thousands, tens of thousands? And you think you're going to reverse it with a few e-collar corrections? I was like, that is not how that happens. And then all of a sudden, the fucking dog won't hunt. He's like, well,
I won't sniff a car.
Now I'm being corrected for sniffing. What the fuck?
Imagine that.
Yep. Extinction training is a thing. It is not fast.
Right. And I guess 2 pieces to back to that. So I don't include positive punishment so I break out search behavior very, very specifically for search behavior. If I'm teaching skills and I'm doing e-collar conditioning or collar conditioning or whatever else, right? Like, that is done contextually in a different not necessarily a different environment, but it has nothing to do with searching. I teach that away and then I can blend it in later, but I do not use positive punishment typically, for some older dogs and maybe for shaping final response behavior for aggression or something, I may, as a last resort. I do not want positive punishment in my search behavior. It absolutely can be detrimental to some dogs in extinction of search behavior. And if it's done improperly, that is, I mean, I've seen it. I've seen dogs default to a behavior from mental pressure and confusion, right? Or that response is actually more powerful than the target odor itself. It's hey, you know, so that creating conflict with positive punishment in the teaching phase of target odor can have repercussions. So you don't need to have it in there if you know how to shape behavior and teach a final response. You don't have to do anything with positive punishment. It's a matter of just training in a different fashion. Right?
Yeah, they learn easier with negative punishment and that. I mean, you're just not rewarding anything. And they're like, what the fuck? The one time I will use positive punishment is in the very, very early phases. So and it's typically just in pointy ears and pretty much in Malinois and Dutchies where, you know, you're on like session 2 of poppers. So they're just on 4 boxes and the dog. So the Europeans, for whatever reason, love to show the dog's willingness to hunt by hiding the tennis ball in a bunch of Chester drawers or whatever, right? Like in their warehouse that they all have, like all dog trainers in Europe have the same. So they hide this tennis ball and then they allow the dog to self-discover and go find this tennis ball. So he hunts the tennis ball and then he learns to dig and drive physically at odor to get to it. And they've done it so many times in Europe that way. When I get the new ones in, especially the Malinois that have enough fucking drive for 2 dogs, they want to destroy the boxes. They want to destroy and aggress on everything because that's what's gotten them like. And I've had to positive punishment my way out of that for touching the boxes, and it's fairly low level. It's kind of blends between negative reinforcement and positive punishment. But because if not, they fucking destroy the boxes. They want to tear up lockers. They want to bite stuff. They turn around, want to bite me. That's about the only time I will. Once they figure out, and it usually only takes a couple corrections. They're like, yo, I ain't going to touch that. And then after that, we're seeing smooth sailing. But
and so I guess to caveat, I don't use, you know, objects and walls and different things to teach target odor. I use the natural search environment, which is paired to the way I've shaped search behavior already. And when I start in one place and teaching target odor, the first day it's maybe inside, the second day we're outside. We're actually using, because of the contextual learning processes, right? We're actually, the variability of the environment is a piece of teaching target odor. I can teach it outside. I can teach it on a vehicle. I can teach it in luggage. I can teach it, you know, create reward history to all these operational items that I may need to use, or just in a regular environment, because in the big picture, I need to search everything, right? And so I paint it that way. What I've seen with the popper boxes, right? Like, what are the associated odors and scents and context of using those, Ted? I mean,
oh yeah,
so it's tennis balls, you have electronics, you have all the transfer scent on the boxes, right? Like, you've got all these, you know, inherent things by reinforcement that later on I'm going to have to go back and potentially clean up. I'm not saying it's the wrong way to do it, because regardless, you still have to provide cognitive discrimination training. But I have gone to a more, again, operational based environment to teach a lot of this stuff, because in the big picture, that's exactly what they're going to see on a day-to-day basis. And
like I said, we solve that problem by everything. I think I have 6 or 7 of those dog trip poppers, and they're all over the place. And they're in every single box, whether it's target odor or not. And so, I got magnets glued to half of them, and they get stuck to cars, and they're just stuck to cars, and the dogs kind of walk by and they're like, all right, whatever. So they get exposure to it like off all the time. But, the one thing that I found is that pretty quickly within 2 or 3 sessions, we start varying the reward in terms of where it comes from, either out of the box or from behind the dog and like over his head. So it's not constantly like, they don't get used to the whole, because I've seen dogs work boxes for months at a time. And I'm like, look, I get it. He knows how to sit on odor. Like, we got to do something else. Like, and that is what we were talking about at the beginning of the segment, is like, we don't wash dogs for their inability to to find to alert on target odor. We wash them because they won't look for it.
Sure, and it may be breed specific too, right? Like you've got to find what makes them tick, and obviously you're aware of that, so you've got your setups to where there's a lot of blank stuff in there, and you're already shaping that search criteria the way you want it, But if you're not thinking that way and you're just doing the check in the box training, right? Like we've got to get 5 odors today. That's where a lot of this stuff is created, right?
All right, so we're going to, right before we go to our next commercial break, I have one question to ask. The next section, we're going to talk about the handler part of it, the queuing thing that Ted mentioned, you hit on. I was just sitting here thinking about this. Probably, so Ted and I get a lot of people, because of the show, reach out and talk to us, ask questions. And I'm going to say, overall, the number one question I get is, hey, I got a problem. My dog is a rock star at training, like kills it in training, works cars at the impound lot, does this, but on the street, he fucks off and won't sniff a car. Like he looks at everything, he stares, he wanders around, he's looking around, or he just walks up and sits at the car. What's your response to those folks?
If you've got conflict and reward history, right? Like this comes kind of back down to the operational thing where, and training's one thing, right? But when we get to live deployments, we've got an issue that's created because of the context. There's a lot of ways to change that, but really, if you introduce search behavior appropriately from the beginning of it, and that includes vehicles, and it doesn't have anything to do with target odor necessarily, right? You can use a lot of different rewards or whatever, but if you paint that picture of vehicles are very high value, and you create the reward history with a secondary reward and occasionally odor, to maintain proficiency or whatever else. You have to do that. You have to simulate that in the operational environment, right? So if that means going code 3 to it, with lights and sirens on and getting them out of the car or whatever, that's how that stuff is created, right? We've simulated one thing in training and it doesn't have the same operational value, right? That's all in the context of how that training's been provided. And it's been very biased in that fashion, clearly. Right? If you get the dog out of the car on a traffic stop and you can't cue him, right? Or he doesn't naturally look at that car as a target, where do you need to work, right? Clearly that's where you're starting.
Yeah. Hey, Ted, real quick. Somebody hit me up yesterday and said he is not allowed, per policy, he's not allowed, it's written in there, he's not allowed to reward on the street because in the policy it says you don't know what the dog is alerting to.
That's not why we don't reward on the street.
But I said, wait a minute. I go, it actually says that? They've actually told you?
That's not why.
I go, so have you ever, go to court and say that. Let's go. Let's on your next suppression hearing, say, well, why didn't you throw the ball when he got that other thing? Oh, because I don't know what he's alerting to. And my policy says I'm not allowed because of that. It's fucking. But you talk about people who are just getting away with shit because they've never been called on it.
Variable reward schedules tell us that the anticipation of reward is more powerful than the reward itself. So the dog's already fucking alerted. He's already hit the dopamine dump before we even give him the fucking ball. Like, that's not why we don't reward on stops. I teach my guys not to reward on stops. One, because it's a safety issue, right? We've had a couple of bites from stops where dudes see the dog alert and they run.
Yeah.
Which, okay. And then 2, I don't want the dog chasing a ball out into fucking traffic. And the 3rd is I want my handler to be able to articulate what he sees on dash and body cam and in his report as the terminal end of the search pattern and the search of the vehicle, not the dog, not like, and I get it. They give us a final, right? But I mean, which is fine. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, depending on whatever's going on. But yeah, it's not because we don't know what he's alerted to. That's that bullshit. That's the whole thing where dudes are like, oh, I'm not going to reward him because I don't know what's in the car. Then they search the car, then they bring him back. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. In training, it's fine.
That's a huge, that's probably one of the biggest issues, I guess, on the LA side that people deal with, the handlers struggle with, and maybe the trainers do too, or realistically, that's, the dog's telling you that you have some extinction, right? They don't want to search the car. They're not targeting it. We've got motivation and we've got search motivation issues. So really going back to how you're going to, the ways you can fix that, there's a number of them. It really depends on the dog. But if you're using variable reward systems, right, and you're using a variable reward schedule, and you're doing a lot of discrimination training on vehicles, meaning you've got your cotton towels that have no target odor on them, and your plastic bags, and you're doing the discrimination training on vehicles, and the dog can clearly articulate without falsing I'm going to reward and pay my dog on that, right? I'm going to do just blank vehicles where there's nothing on it. It's how do you maintain that search behavior? So when they get out of a car, they're going, is this going to be the car or is it not going to be the car? Right. And through those processes, right, like you're going to find out just how accurate your dog really is when you start putting those associated, scents and odors and stuff for the discrimination piece on blank vehicles. Chances are your dog's going to false a lot if you have never done this, because again, it's inherent to the way they've been trained. I need the dog. And this is, this is the other side of it is it, you can call it on an alert or a change of behavior if you want to, right? And in some instances, you probably should because the environmental conditions, or maybe you have some threshold variance. So there's a number of reasons why you may call it on a change of behavior, right? But for me, if I've provided a very high level of discrimination training and my dog goes up and throws a change of behavior on the door handle because the guy just touched it, or on the back hatch of a vehicle because there's human scent there or whatever else, I'm going to let him decide whether there's target odor there or not. You can have a change of behavior, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily target odor. That's why discrimination training is huge. And that's where accuracy is going to be potentially argued, right? Like, so let him make that decision, change of behavior, go to where you think it's interesting and indicate or don't indicate, or offer a behavior that is more convincing to me to where I may call it on a change of behavior because I've seen this in training over and over and over again. I am the expert of your behavior, right?
Yeah. And when we train new guys, new handlers, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again here. One, there's a court case based on what we're talking about right now, U.S. versus Bentley. And it's from 2015 from the Seventh Circuit, because there's two other cases that aren't anything to do with fucking dogs that are also U.S. versus Bentley. So if you want to read it, it's about a handler that gives terrible testimony during his deposition and during his cross-examination. And I swear to God, he says he always rewards the dog on a stop no matter what. And so it inevitably goes down the rabbit hole and begs the question, is he performing the behavior because of target odor, or is he performing the behavior because he gets his toy every time?
Because cars produce toys.
Yeah. So there's a discussion there, right? But that's US versus Bentley. The other thing is, if you read a ton of case law, you'll read there's a term that every federal and state court uses a lot. And I don't know that I think I know why they do it, because they're precise, but in the vein of this conversation, dogs are taught to find the odor of, not the presence of. And it's a fundamental difference, right? We teach them to find the odor of narcotics or explosives, whatever it is, not the physical presence of. So the dog can give you a legitimate alert or change of behavior on a vehicle because it does possess target odor, but does not possess target substance. And that's where we deal with residual and transfer and all this other shit. But there's a huge difference between that and being like, I don't want to reward him because I don't know. Yeah, because I don't know. And I'm like, well, fuck. Like, how are you doing it blind? Because you should be doing blinds all the time in training, and you should be doing double blinds about 4 times a year. But how do you know? Like, even in fucking training. So
yeah, and that again, I think you need to internally look at like unconfirmed alerts.
Yeah.
If you're getting more unconfirmed alerts than you are,
finding
confirmed finds, then maybe that's suggestive to you have some accuracy issues, right? But again, that's accuracy is really what the point of contention is going to be. In the explosive world, it's eye, limb, and life. And in the legal side, it's going to be, okay, well, show me where your dog's accurate because, Fourth Amendment rights, it's just the way, it's just the direction that we're going. So to me, that's why incorporating a high level of cognitive discrimination training is very important. And Florida v. Harris is suggestive. They even added the Q piece into there. It wasn't, the hot topic, but they absolutely are aware that exists. And so do you want to go down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, we'll get after the break. We're going to get into the handler side of the false response issue. So stick around, guys. Don't go anywhere. If you fast forward through commercials, at least check out the show notes. Everything will be in there, the discount codes and the websites and everything like that. But we really appreciate you guys, our sponsors. They're real happy with it, with the way you guys have been supporting them. Also, the commercials are all brand new, and Alicia recorded them, so it's not Ted and I, and because I know I get sick of hearing Ted and I, and so I'm sure you do too. So Alicia's it's doing it, and she sounds a lot better than we do. So we'll have those commercials in there for about 6 months, and then we'll do something different. But stick around; we'll be right back.
Every year for the past 4 years, our guys have instructed at HITS Canine Conference. This year is going to be in the Big Easy, guys. It's going to be in New Orleans, and I'm really excited about that. It's going to be August 26th through 29th, 2024. It is packed to the brim with the world's best instructors in covering the most important canine topics. There is no better place to learn. There's no better place to network. If you guys want to meet, greet, and shake hands and grab a beer with everything who's canine, everybody who's canine, this is the place to go. You need to hit Jeff Barrett at 863-529-5113. Go to hitscanine.net and get signed up. Don't miss out on this one, guys. Come buy us a beer. We would love to see you. Come shake our hands. We'll have stuff at the booth for you. We'll see you at HITS.
All right, everybody, we are back. Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite. Eric Stamber and Ted Summers with our buddy Darren, DJ Holmes from Colorado. Giving a lot of people a lot of things to think about. And the stuff we were talking about, the cognitive discrimination training, handlers are like, dude, I'm just the fucking knuckle dragger, man. Like, and there's a lot of guys out there without help, right?
Yep.
And so this is why we provide this type of stuff. You'll be able to, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to DJ and get some explanation or probably even some real easy steps to get started in the right direction, clear up some of your problems. Now, something that I think we brought it up at the first time about cueing and handlers reaching in their back and reaching in their pocket, reaching in their hoodie and different things like that. And should that or shouldn't that cause any kind of response out of the dog? And where does that fall in the training? So, and then Ted mentioned, and he's right, the one thing that attorneys keep trying to use in court, especially now with everything on camera, is that you cued your dog. So if you want a hilarious way to fuck with those guys, and not in a professional setting, but semi-professional, ask them to explain it. What cue means? Just ask an attorney, even one that's a self-professed dog guy. Yeah, ask him to explain. You're like, he's cute. I'm like, I don't know, and just play dumb. I've done that multiple times, and watching them. Yeah, you don't say the word cue 10 times. Cue, cued right there. Yeah, cue, cue. So I'm like, explain that to me. Well, you say cue one more time, I'm gonna punch you in the fucking face. It's humorous to watch. It's actually pretty funny. DJ, let's talk about the human piece of this whole thing.
There's two kind of main reasons I think that this is happening. Obviously, if you're not aware of contextual learning and training and how reinforcement is occurring and creating these sequences that are inherent to the way we train, the start of a task leading to reward and everything in between that dog is capturing. Cueing can be a major issue by biasing a reward history when the dog is observing your behavior through those processes. And that can be by the way that you're paying. It can be by the way that you're teaching. If you're presenting during imprinting and teaching, presenting to cans on leash and doing an inverted V or whatever, and that leads to reward, then guess what? You just reinforced all of your behavior leading to that reward, right? So I typically use a lot of cues and a lot of human behavior for the discipline that I'm using now, which involves a lot of handler input. You just need to balance the expectation of is just because I do this behavior, it doesn't mean it's going to produce reward. So I am constantly going to introduce my behavior, cues, presentations, Velcro, whatever process you're using during those reward sequences, you've got to take that out essentially, right? And it's really just creating, again, that specific search criteria and marking the behaviors that you want. You've created it from doing it improperly or through repetition, right? And so you've got to reverse engineer that and go back and say, okay, well, if I present this box that's blank, right, and you indicate to it, then fine. Go ahead and sit there until you realize that it's no longer going, this behavior is not going to pay you in the absence of target odor, right? And it goes kind of back to the same process. Once they can self-recover and then the search behavior continues, I may recall them back to it again and say, hey, check it, right? And that's kind of creating the extinction to the human behavior side, or the cue that's associated from reinforcing with target odor. They will also do it because of stress or confusion, right? If you're not doing it regularly, and kind of creating that boil up point, that's another reason that they will do it. But again, it's a byproduct of how we've trained, and it's incorporated from the rewards, the sequence of search behavior to reward.
And just to kind of like put it into perspective for people listening, like at how easy this is, and how inadvertently you start cueing. I had a guy that was in one of my old training groups. I trained the dog. When he left class, he would get like his face, like if you're not watching on YouTube, you can't see, but I mean, within as close to odors, he would, right? I saw the dog about 9-10 months later, and the dog would alert, but when he would alert, he would take like 3 big steps back off of odor. And the handler's like, first of all, I love the handler. He's a big kid, and he's very strong, and he likes to throw shit. So he had a bad habit of fucking winging his
Nolan
Kong.
Ryan.
Dude, it looked like he was trying out for the fucking Dodgers. He would throw that Kong so fucking hard, and it would bounce off of cars, and the dog was doing it so he could catch it off the rebound. And I was like, yo, like, let's back up for a second. And he was like, I didn't even notice it, because it just kind of inevitably happened when he would wing the Kong and the dog started expecting it. Then the dog would have to fucking jibber jabber around and chase it. And then the dog's like, oh, I'll just back up and catch it off the backboard. It's like somebody misses a free throw.
He inadvertently reshaped that final response right through that sequence.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and your dog does that, and you're sitting there looking at your right or left hand, you're like, dude, I do throw that pretty hard. The easiest way to do it, to fix it, is go back to the behavior that you want. As soon as his ass gets his nose close, even if he doesn't final, just drop it on his nose. Don't throw it. As soon as he puts his nose where odor is, just drop it, and then you can push him back the same way that you pushed him away.
Or create an indirect marker, right? Where you can do it directly, you can do it indirectly, right? Like there's a lot of ways to really refine final response behavior. But you're exactly right. Like that's created because of how he was, the style of payment that he was doing. And he's obviously got a pretty tough dog, but if you're doing that during an imprinting phase with a fairly soft dog or a young dog, you may turn the game off completely just by doing that. Right?
Yeah, I had a dog that I was using Dutch boxes, and I started to reward from behind, and I hit him in the back of the head with a ball, like hard. I hit him hard with a black Kong. And for about 2 weeks, every time he would alert, he would flinch. Because I smoked him in the back of the head with a fucking or the giant black
right.
Kong.
And again, if that does it, if that's not another prime example, you've heard me say contextual learning every 5 minutes, right? If that's not another example of it, it's that because of how you paid it, that is tied to the process of finding target odor, right? It's remembered. It is a sequence of events that happened before you reinforce target odor, right?
I've seen dogs come to me for maintenance training or whatever, that you couldn't even clear your throat while they were searching, or they wouldn't even do it. So you mentioned the Velcro, like getting in the hoodie pocket, getting in your other pocket. So what you're saying is to try to eliminate that stuff is do all that shit during the
do more of it. And if they offer a behavior, then that behavior now needs to be extinct in that context. one of the other reasons it's created is because we put up a problem and ends up being more difficult for whatever reason. Maybe odor's not available, or we just, environmental conditions change or whatever. And so because of time or because of lack of understanding, we go up and we just, to get the dog success and to try and teach, we just go up and present it and show them, hey, it's right here. He sniffs it. Boom, we pay him. Through repetition, you can bias that as well, right? So if the dog's going to always look to you for help and you go in and problem solve for them, that's another way that cue is created, right? We use, there's a cue for everything. We need to shape them with value the way we want it. So ideally, at the end of this, and using very advanced cognitive discrimination training, so you've got associated scents and odors out there, right? You've got objects where you've had bias reward history, right? I want a dog that I am able to go up to and say, hey, check this, and present it, right? He goes and he sniffs it and he says, nope, this isn't it. I know it's not it. And he automatically defaults to searching for what he knows is going to pay him. If I recall him 6 times, I still want that same behavior. I also go to the extent of I'll pull out my Kong out of my pocket while he's doing that and act like back up 2 steps and swing that thing around like I'm going to pay him. That would be a very advanced discrimination test to see if he's actually going to false from your behavior. And if you do it right, they don't. They go, nope, I know what I'm looking for, and this isn't it. So it's all how that is provided to them.
Yeah, and a lot of people that do indirect rewards, where the dog comes back to them if they're using a tug, a lot of those people will already have the tug in their hand. So that it's yes, and they mark and come back to the tug, and the dog still works. Whether you have the dog free search or whether you detail and show them where to go. So somebody sent me a video the other day of their dog. They were on a wall just to show me, he's going up and down with the search pattern. He's trying to get him to go up and down. The dog, the odor was in the very first center hole of the wall, like face height, and the dog obviously had hit the odor, but kept going up and down and wouldn't go back and alert until the handler went back and presented that. Is that a dog problem, or is that a handler problem, or the way the training was kind of accomplished?
Yeah, I would say that they've made that dog an expert in the way that they've trained them. And that's probably the sequence that they've created leading to reward, right? That's not having an independent dog that knows how to problem solve on itself. If you want a handler dependent dog, that's how you get it in detection training, is you simplify it for them to the point where that's just the game now, right? Your behavior absolutely influences whether or not he's going to do that.
Yeah, if you're doing one of the things I like to do, especially early on with a younger dog when I'm imprinting, is and I'm involved and I'm showing them where I want them to go, and it's almost like I'm revving them up and not revving them up, but getting them started. And so when they're going, and I can hear and I can see that they're actually working like a whole seam or whatever, I'll step back out of the way as long as they're working. Or do you like to kind of just still keep showing them where you want them to stick to?
Ideally, I want the dog to independently go out and search on his own. And that, again, that's shaped from the beginning. If it's 4 months or 5 months of search behavior, that's how long it takes. I'm going to refine it to exactly what I want. Now, if I'm in it, because as a handler, I'm monitoring the environment that I'm in. If it's an environment that requires a very high level of a detailed search, then I'm going to probably use the cues that I've built, spatial pressure, right? And I'm just going to move to that area, and I'm going to stand there like this or with my hands down to my side, and just a stationary presence, the way I build it, means you need to be searching around me, right? And if it's not as detailed as I want, then I'll go ahead and just provide a verbal marker, and I'll just say, check it. And when I say check it, that verbal marker means that mouth is closed and the nose is sniffing. And that's what creates a more detailed search the way I teach it, right? So I've got all these cues and markers that I've already built that transfer directly over to, kind of the operational piece. It's intricate, right? It's very intricate. And I think that we missed the mark on teaching search behavior to a very specific level that is your opportunity to teach the dog how you want them to search. That is the beginning of search criteria, right? And then I just include the odor piece to it afterwards.
We were talking a lot about like the training and the handling side. There are some case law implications on this too. I think at this point, everybody's familiar with the Idaho thing where the dog touched the car. And I actually have the body cam from that, from two different angles. And but the dog was really trained well. The handler actually, to his credit, does a great job. He doesn't talk to the dog. He's not in the dog's fucking way. He's not presenting everything. He's literally walking behind him at about a 3 to 4 foot gap so he can observe all of the dog's body language and body change. And the dog gives a head throw as he comes back around. He brackets up and down, left and right, and in and out under the car. Like, it's obvious that there's something there. Puts his paws up on the window slightly. Handler's like, good boy, variables him off. And he's like, yeah, you're good. And he turns to whoever. He was like, yeah, you've got positive or something. Is what he says. But there was also a case that Eric sent me from last month, from February, because we're still in March. What is it? U.S. versus Corbett, I think. It just got published in West Virginia, where they vacated a search for his dog putting his nose through the window, through an open window, and they constituted that a search. But if you go and read it, they talk a lot about the handler intervention. So they make a distinction in that case, the judges did, of a dog that is doing a behavior naturally versus one where he's being commanded to do something. And they're like, if he was just commanded to jump and actually stuck his nose through the window, which is what happened. Obviously, this constitutes a search. However, if the dog does it in quotations as a naturally behavior that is not, I don't remember exactly how they worded it, but basically is the dog's just doing it naturally, then you can't really like knock the dog for it. So there's a lot of behaviors that I hear handlers all the time. Tracking is my number one fucking thing. When I'm like, he heard you the first time, he's still tracking, shut up. Like, or you don't need to say sook, 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 sook 400 fucking times while you're running a car. Say it once. You didn't even say anything. My guys didn't even say anything. Just point at the car. They set the dog, sit, cast, dog's going. They don't say anything. So if you want a good commentary on how the legal community currently views what they think queuing is, go read that case, U.S. versus Corbett. It just got published, I think.
It was like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, not long ago.
February 25th. Hold on. While you guys are talking, I'll look it up. But yeah, it's U.S. versus Corbett from West Virginia. So, yeah.
So one of my things I'm going to bring up, the last thing here when it comes to the human side of stuff, I do believe that some of the false response, especially when it comes to vehicles, comes from a relationship problem between the handler and the dog. And it's usually because the handler hammers the fucking dog in sits and all kinds of things, where every thing that the handler says is paired with a correction. And a lot of this comes from cops having fucking OCD, and the dog must sit before we start because I got to put my fucking gloves on and I got to get my fucking shit straight. And the dog's pulling and trying to go fucking work, and they're hammering these fucking dogs. And so what happens is, rather than be that dog's leader, his driver, the thing he wants to work for, you become a punisher and you make him nervous. And so when you go to sniff a car, he goes up to it and he doesn't immediately find odor and just says, fuck it. And he sits. And you'll see those dogs go sit, 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 sit all the fucking way around the car, because you now have a serious problem between the two of you. I see it a lot. I'd be like, who told you to do that? Like, who told you to just hammer, like pair, sit with every correction? Because then you go sook and he's like, fuck. And they flinch because every word that comes out of your mouth is paired with something. So I'm not saying, some guys are like, oh, detection dogs don't need obedience. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, do the obedience where his behavior causes him problems and not your presence or your words. Do you see do you see that stuff?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, keep the conflict out of obedience. Like, there's a level of obedience for each discipline of dog that I'm going to train. The expectation may be different, right? But you still have to teach obedience, but it needs to be done in a fashion to where there is no conflict. And you guys see this all the time with the bite dogs. It's like you said, I think that it's probably more so exacerbated in that scenario you're talking about with the dual purpose guys, because control is, especially for a new handler, is like they're preached. Don't let the dog get out of control, because if he bites somebody that he's not supposed to, and yada yada yada. So it's finding that balance and kind of educating them between creating conflict from constant nagging or punishment, right? And then actually understanding that, you need the dog to search, and doing all of that is going to potentially kill the search motivation, right? So that's a hard concept to teach for some personalities, or maybe it's even harder because that's the way that they were trained to do it, right? Like the dog's got to sit coming out of the car, and then you actually formally cue them. Like, to me, I want the dog coming out of the car, looking at the environment, targeting things to search. And I don't need obedience to do that, right? Like, that is the dog is understanding and telling me that I know the task that we're doing because you've trained me that way. Give me an opportunity, give me the opportunity to find something, right? And through all of these processes, whatever the environment is, distractors, environmental distractors, whatever the situation is, I understand exactly what the search criteria is, and if there's something there, I'm going to tell you. And if there's not, then we're gonna leave the environment and we're going to go look for something else, or you're going to tell me I did a good job and reward me, and we move on to the next day. I mean, realistically, I want a dog that understands that we can search for 3 or 4 days, a week, before I find target odor, and they're fine with that because I can still reinforce the search motivation and behavior that I want. And they have the cognitive discrimination training to a very high level to where that's just the expectation. We go long. Sometimes it's days before we find this stuff.
Well, right? If you think about which from your old job doing route clearances, most of them aren't going to have something. So if you're with a certain unit that's hot, that they're working, man, they're going out every night, every couple nights, you're going to have 6, 10, 15 missions, no hit.
That's right. And that absolutely affects search motivation. And that was something that I dealt with, on a regular basis. It was, how do you keep these dogs motivated and keep them working in really difficult environments, right? Like, so.
And guys, don't listen. I'm a big prong collar guy. I love prong collars. Most of you do not know what the fuck you're doing with a prong collar. You're absolutely not doing it correct. You still think it's supposed to be white knuckles on that leash and blast that dog in there. And then I'll see him doing detection with a prong collar on. I got to slow him down. How about you suck less? Let's work on that. I got to slow him down. So you're correcting him and providing pressure on the dog in the search environment. You need to get better as a handler instead of now I get it. If you tell him Sook at the back license plate and he is at the front of the car in half a second and never sniffed a single thing, that's a problem unrelated to that's a training problem.
That's the shaping of search behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. You gave that example, Eric, of, the dog just racing around the car, not sniffing a thing. And again, the dog is never going to dictate the pace of the search for me. I am, as the handler and as the trainer, am going to build the search that I want. We move on when I say we move on. If we're not moving on, right, it's like you hear people all the time, don't leave that dog in that room too long or they're going to false, right? There's another one. It's like, nope, if I'm in this room for 20 minutes, you better be searching it. And the reality of it is if your search behavior is correct, that dog should search there, and it's not only going to search in there, but the longer you're in there, it's going to start searching areas it hasn't been to, and it's going to say, hey, we're still here, it's got to be in here, and they naturally just kind of process the room that way, right? So to me, again, the stationary pause means if I'm right here and we're in this sequence potentially leading to reinforcement, that's the behavior that I expect, right? I could be in a 10 by 10 room for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
like I said, that's the hardest thing for narcotics handlers to admit, that there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be wrong.
Well, it's the same thing on the street with if the guy's with a SWAT team or they're doing, a room to room search in a building for a burglar, they'll send the dog into a room 5 times. I see a lot of people getting bit, backup guys getting bit after the third or fourth time. And the dog's like, oh, okay, it's this fucker then. It must be him, instead of, because they don't want to say to the backup guys, hey, listen, dog search, people clear. We're going to move on to this next room, but two, you need to dump in there and just give it a shot, man. And it, cause they're afraid that the guys are like, oh, the fuck, we got the dog then. But now we're drifting to some tangents. So, real quick, and we're going to be done here. So the basic thing I see from listen to what you're talking about, build search history, build a search patterns, build all that stuff away from target odor originally. Just teach them how to search. What are they searching? What are you searching for?
So in the beginning stages, like I said, I identify at least 2 rewards. I just call them a primary reward or a secondary reward. Later on, I may use 5 different rewards, right? And I'm going to use verbal marker systems in there as well to shape search behaviors, right? So typically the secondary reward, I like to use bumpers. I'm a retriever guy. I typically train a lot of those. That starts out with just kind of a retrieve, right? Like once they have a desire for the bumper, then I use a lure. I just throw it out of sight. It may be called a mark in the hunting world, right? You just throw it out of sight or throw it in sight, right? They go out, retrieve it, bring it back to you. You say, good boy, woo, and you do it over again. You throw it in sight to another place. That progresses to out of sight, where now they've got an hunt for it. That's kind of creating the natural, I can't see it, I go find it, right? And then that progresses from there. The second piece of that is, again, the way I shape fauna response behavior. I'm going to introduce the Kong, right? That's going to be associated with target odor later. And then they're going to hunt, same process. They're going to see it. They're going to go get it. It's going to be hidden. They're going to go do it. And then I start actually paying on sniff for hidden Kongs, teaching that same behavior that's going to shift. I'm going to shift the criteria later from the Kong to target odor. And then I'm just going to phase out the Kong altogether in the search environment.
All right. So, yeah. And guys, when he's talking about this, it sounds like, oh my God, that's like months worth of work. It actually isn't.
No, it's not.
I'm not saying you do this in 2 days, but I'm saying don't get stressed over this stuff. If you're a new trainer or trying to get into training, or maybe you are noticing a problem in your program, this isn't months and months and months before you add target odor in. But you're not going to start Monday and have target on Tuesday. He searches. He's fucking great. He's, skipping steps or keeping the dog in kindergarten too long are 2 problems.
Yeah.
When it comes to the accuracy piece, target odor is a small percentage of it. There's way more on the backside because of the inherent things that are created during the reinforcement processes. I mean, that's really what cognitive discrimination training is. But most people aren't aware of it, or they don't provide a high level of it. And really, to get accuracy, that you need to set up training to where the dog is absolutely telling you he knows exactly the parameters of which he's going to get rewarded, right? So
it's funny you mentioned bumpers. So when I was just in Alabama, the Army guys were there, and I just posted a reel a little bit ago, just 3 videos of the same dog working a verbal out on the bite work. He was super clean and smooth. But on the bumper, it was a whole nother story, buddy. That dog loved that freaking bumper. And a lot of police guys don't use those, but it was pretty funny. They have cases of those things that they use.
Sure. And there is, I guess there's probably some argument on the value of rewards and variable reward and how you're using them. Again, the bumper to my dogs is a self-reward process. So in the context of going out and hunting, they are rewarding themselves the minute that they smell it, and then they find it and they bring it back. I give a little bit of interaction doing that. When it comes to the target odor and I'm using the Kong, my reward sequence. So I classify kind of a search sequence leading to reward, and then I shape kind of a reward sequence. So my interaction with the dog at the highest value, right, in order to keep commitment to odor, and there's not really competing motivators between the two, my enthusiasm and behavior with the target odor and the Kong, when that is discovered, is a very higher level than just the self-reward piece of it and just a little bit of interaction like, hey, good boy, let's get back to work, right? So those those have value to a dog on when you're using variable reward. It's how you paint that picture. So different rewards have different levels of value, and your engagement level can help dictate that, which creates a little bit more clarity from my experience.
So those of you who are listening, and we try to touch on some things for a little bit of everybody. When he's talking about reward history, and maybe you don't understand exactly what he's meaning by like a reward history, I'll give you a perfect, easy example. Your building that you're training in has desks and filing cabinets and things like that. And you're always putting your drugs or your explosives in those things and rewarding, and that becomes a productive environment. So when you let your dog off leash, he goes into the room and he goes straight for the filing cabinet because of a reward history of those things. But he never sniffs light sockets or he never sniffs other things because there is no reward history. So this is kind of what we're talking about. I meant to ask you, where do you fall on law enforcement dogs in general, in all certifications or whatever, having a NORT type test as part of the cert?
Just the odor recognition part.
Yeah.
Piece
Is
of
it needed or not?
That is for the human. That is not for the dog. I mean, I'll leave it at that, right? Like why wouldn't you, to me, if you want odor recognition, you want to see odor recognition, it should be in an operational environment. Why wouldn't you just set it up that way? Just hide the stuff and see if the dog has odor rec. If you've put out a good hide and you know that there's odor available, then why do you need paint cans or boxes or whatever else to say yes or no? That only really hurts your accuracy, especially if you've already got a bias reward history. And doing 15 odors in 20 minutes also can affect accuracy. That is that the context of that is we go to this place. And you see it all the time if you recertify in the same place. Just going to that specific building is a cue and a huge marker. They know it is Disneyland when they go to that building.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so that's where the variability in environments and training and all that stuff comes into play.
Every dog I've ever trained at my facility, when they show back up at my facility, they're bouncing
Disneyland.
off the fucking walls in the back of the car.
Yeah. Yep. And so, again, that really doesn't provide any operational value to me. I would rather see it in an operational type setup. And I get it, time and constraint and checking the boxes, like it is what it is. But what I would honestly like to see is for people to really, again, go back and try to understand the sequences that are built in training from contextual thought processes. And if you really start to open your eyes to that as a trainer and as a handler, I think you're going to understand what we're actually reinforcing. And at the end of understanding that, especially as a trainer, you're going to go like, well, maybe I need to start training differently, and having that operational picture front loaded at the beginning of it, because it's only going to benefit me in the end. Right? Not putting just this repetitious human thought process for training a dog together, because when you start looking for the repercussions of that, they're there. And that's why really cognitive discrimination training should exist, because you can reverse engineer and then remediate.
Problem solve, folks. That's the big difference between handlers and trainers is problem solving, honestly. The big difference where you can see those problems and then reverse engineer and remediate those issues through recognizing. Actually, you got to also have the ability to self-reflect, look inward and go, what have we been doing? Oh, fuck, man.
It's really complex diagnosing, and it can get, again, if you've created such a bias reward history from the start of training, first time experiences for dogs are highly valuable, right? And if you just cream them with one thing, they become an expert in that one thing, and then it's going to take a lot of time to try and clean it up later. So, we didn't even really get into kind of the odor generalization processes and how that comes into play with it. I mean, this could go on for days. Yeah. And I've been trying to put together some good resource material, and hopefully at some point in time we may be doing some classes. But
I'm telling you, I'm gonna get you in front of a PowerPoint at one of these seminars, man. One of these conferences. 2 hours. You need to do 2 hours. Just stick to what we were talking about today, because the generalization is a whole nother rabbit hole. You could do 2 hours on it.
There's skill generalization, and then it comes to like generalization of odor when you're actually marking for the use of your nose. That's a whole nother channel that goes through the brain, right? So
yeah, we just had Steve Antimarchi on talking about the weed and hemp studies, and the dogs generalized, and then they generalized in various hemp products. So,
I listened to that. That was a great podcast.
Yeah, it's
really
crazy how
that.
fast that goes.
Yeah.
I know one more thing, and this is. I can tell you, I wasn't always good at this. I don't know where you were, how long you've been doing this, Ted, and it's mainly because, if I have 5 or 6 guys in the handler class or more, or whatever, we're working the odor. We gotta get going. What is your blank rate, percentage of, like, say, blank cars? Say you have 20 cars and you have 4 odors. How many of those are going to be blank? Or what's your percentage? You more blanks than hot?
At the beginning of handler school, they know exactly how much and where on a car, in a room, or whatever it is, the odor is. And during that phase of training the handler, I want them to recognize changes of behavior. They're learning how to not use their 2 fucking hands on a leash, or they get hit with the stick. I hate that. So, because I don't want them focusing on the final. I think at the beginning of this episode, I said we put so much emphasis on reinforcing the final response, and we skip everything leading up to it. So then they progress to and they're not allowed to reward either the first week either. We reward, myself or my trainers reward, right? So they already got enough browser tabs open in the windows and the computer, and the fucking CPU slows down, and the handlers are like, what? Like, Eric, you tell a story about that dude who you love, who would show up all the time without a fucking ball. And you're like, dude,
where's your reward, dude?
So the second half of school, they'll do a room, and I say, this room is hot, so go find it and tell me where it's at. Right. So then they're focusing on realizing, like what DJ was talking about, like where we're seeing a change in behavior, and then stepping in and saying, okay, he showed me a ton of interest, or the code that they use is he doesn't want to leave this area of the room. And I'm like, oh, why do you think that is? Like, fucking come on. Like, so then they're learning to step in and say, okay, now detail this for me. And then what detailing looks like, what it sounds like, what the behavior changes are. Then we move into blinds. Now I say there is X number of fines out between these 12 cars or 15 cars outside and 6 rooms inside. You've got 4 fines. Tell me where they're at. And I may tell them how much weight is out, because I make them look at, an ounce versus trace. Right. So the dogs behave differently in a normal location. So before I'm asking them to run blinds, they're going to demonstrate to me that they understand, 1, what the fuck they're doing, and 2, do they understand what they're looking at with the dog? Because, like I said, it's the hardest thing for a narcotics handler to admit that there's nothing there. And I make them tell me the changes of behavior beforehand. I'm like, what's he going to do before he gives you your final? And they're like, oh, he's going to go blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay.
So in a vehicle, there's 1 blank car. The rest are hot for your certification. I don't know if that's for expediency or what that is. And so a lot of people, and I did it for years, trained that way. All right. We got 6 odors, 7 cars, because that's what your test is going to be. And you're going on and on and on. And now there's 7 cars, one hide, doing more blanks, which I find over time helps to severely reduce or eliminate the false response.
If you're a trainer and you're listening to this, and the best phrase you can say to a new handler when they're doing, like, they're trying to make something there that's not, and I just say, how much more obvious do you need this to be? And they kind of look at me, and I'm like, okay, what are you not seeing? They're like, oh, I'm not seeing head change. I'm not hearing bracket. I'm not hearing chambering. I'm like, it's because there's no fucking odor in here. So don't make it here. Like, go move. And I said, also, you can come back, like, keep a mental inventory. Like, if he refused to leave but couldn't get it because it was a deep find, go find the other ones and then bring his ass back and cast him in and see if he does the same thing. And if he gives you the same, then you can start investigating that area more. But like multiple times with handlers, I'm like, how much more obvious do you need that to be?
So DJ, where do you fall in the percentage of blank search areas versus hot?
Well, I kind of constantly monitor that stuff pretty rigorously. I mean, I always have a performance objective for my training, and I'm going to dictate my training results. And at the end of that training result, I'm going to have my next training setup or the next, couple training setups. So it's a living document. They all kind of follow each other. I don't just do blank vehicles. I mean, I do a lot of blank stuff, right? Those are easy because I can just go to any environment and chances are I'm going to have that just naturally occurring. I do a ton of what I call ODCAD blanks, where there is all of the discrimination pieces that I'm looking for on those vehicles. So if I start with just seeing if my odor or human scent is an issue, I'll go, rub my neck, my face, whatever, and I'll go rub the bumper of a vehicle, right? And I'll run my dog on it. And he's going to throw a change of behavior because that's ingrained in his reward history from the learning aspect of how we teach it, right? You just can't get rid of it. Or if you use gloves, it's going to be gloves, right? Like it's the same thing. It's transfer scent, basically. If he can go up to it and say, yeah, this is great, it's nothing, and keep searching the vehicle, I'm generally pretty good on that. The next vehicle, I'm probably going to put human scent and another associated odor or scent. So maybe it's my scent with a cotton towel, or maybe it's my scent with just a used nitrile glove or a polyethylene glove. That's going to be on the next vehicle, right? And so we're going to go up and search it, and he's probably going to show interest or a change of behavior to it, and he's going to go sniff it, and hopefully he leaves it, because that's what aligning search criteria is about, right? I'm taking the things that I know that we've trained into this scent picture, essentially, because there's no other way to do it. And you need to tell me whether or not that's going to get you to offer a behavior that I don't want. And then I'm going to go to the next vehicle and I'm going to put something very visual on it. Maybe it's a container that I've used, in training, or hell, maybe I go stick a box or a popper box right next to the vehicle if that's the way the dog was imprinted, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Uh-huh. And so all of these contextual pictures and things that are in there, I go just through the lineup one by one, and then I start adding a +1 or a +2 or a +3. And then I may recall, they have a change of behavior on a distractor. They may discriminate on their own, and then I'm going to recall them back and be like, hey, come over here. And I'm going to present right at that exact spot. And I'm going to say, check it. Because that's the inference of my behavior that they need to discriminate as well, right? That's part of that cue piece that needs to be out of it. So if they're good on the human scent, they're good on the nitrile glove, right? They're good on the two of them together. And then I bring the inference of my behavior back into it, and they can discriminate through that. Now we're on the right track, and it just keeps getting more and more advanced from there. So a blank vehicle, I'll just do, blanks, but I really do more controlled negative trainings than I do probably blanks.
Yeah, it's pretty hard for defense attorneys to fight against too. Ted, when he looks through all these cases, sees a lot of. We talked about it before. One of the biggest things they're doing is, so every car you search in training is hot, like every car, every room, and that's just bad training. I mean, I guarantee you I did it years ago. Guaranteed, because we had 25 dogs at training and we got to fucking go. So go.
Fun story. Recently, a bunch of my handlers came in for in-service, and we told them it was blind night. And I told them, I was like, just go tell me where the odor's at. Tell me and Jaden where the odor's at. And I didn't put any out. They searched like 40 fucking cars with no alerts, and like, talk about some frustrated fucking handlers. I was like, dude, just run the car. If he doesn't give you anything, he doesn't give you anything. It's not like, and I finally told him, I was like, there's no odor out. That's why you're not like, I mean, that's why you're not seeing anything. And I was like, I said, that counts, by the way, like, document that. Like, so
yeah,
now.
And the sucky part of doing the discrimination training to that level from a training record standpoint, it's fairly labor intensive to really articulate what you're doing, why you're doing it, right? But at the end of the day, if you're providing that level of discrimination, a very high level of discrimination. It's realistically, to me, the only way you can say is my dog is as calibrated and as accurate as they're going to be, because I understand through training what they are capturing through those processes. And I have shrunken that criteria to be very specific to, nope, it's just target odor that gets me trained. They're not 100% all the time. It's time consuming, right? There's a lot to it. But at the end of the day, when hopefully when a defense attorney looks at your training records and they go, holy smokes, I've never seen anything like this in my life to this detail, they're probably going to say, like, you better get a plea or dismiss, whatever, because this isn't going to, you're not going to argue accuracy with this team.
Correct. So real quick, my, at the funhouse, which was originally 25,000 square feet. Now it's about 200,000 square feet. Because everyone moved out of the building but me. So they let me use anything I want. But there's this one section that was an office before. It's a huge, I don't know, it's about 2,000 square foot room full of cubicles. Full of them. And then there's like 6 or 8 offices along the wall. So I'll tell the handlers, all right, there's one hide up in that room. Come down, tell me where it's at. And I'll put something on the desk that, like a Burger King bag, something that would be distinctive that they could tell me
motivator.
But what happens is I'll put my phone up there. And these motherfuckers I'll see them, the dog's off leash looking, and they're going through the drawers looking because they are nervous. And, I'm like, hey, I get my phone, the video. I'm like, hey, motherfucker, can't you just let him work? You're over here. I know it's a team sport, but come on, man. We're trying to do training. So what I found is if you make it separate where you or whoever the proctor of that problem is are the only people over there, and there's not just guys standing around token and joking, and they don't have to come out and say anything in front of the other guys, they stop doing that shit. But anytime handlers are worried about finding nothing, like Ted was saying, or they get nervous about this shit, man, they'll just do dumb shit, man. It's like, can't we just go along with it, and we'll find out. We got to find out if your dog has some deficiencies, or if he's just the baddest motherfucker there is. And that's the one we're calling for the search warrant at P. Diddy's house, that type of shit. So is there anywhere people can get a hold of you, DJ, on social media?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I'm not real active on them as of recent, but I'm on Facebook. It's just under Darren Holmes. And then on Instagram, it's Salt Dog Canine. It's salt_canine. And I've got some old kind of reference material for some of the things we've talked about, but I haven't had time to really do any new material. You can PM me or whatever if you've got questions, but I think this is very, very critical timing to start, if you're not doing this stuff, to start putting it in there. Would you really do it long enough and you kind of see it and the dog is telling you exactly what they know and you've got your search criteria aligned? You've witnessed a change of behavior from an associated odor and discrimination training, and the dog goes up, checks it, and leaves it. You can pretty much say, yeah, hey, in training, you can run it blind. I know that's a discriminator. It was set out to test the dog's ability, right? And if the dog indicates, then you can pretty much assume it's target odor because I've trained the dog to understand that, right? It makes it a lot easier to trust the training and your dog when you've put them through the paces consistently to know where their deficiencies really are. And you'll see it in their cognitive processes, right? Like you could start remediation training, and if you allow them to kind of work the problems out themselves, and you mark the search behavior when it continues, this stuff will start happening less and less, and then the dog is always going to tell you what they know and what they don't know and where you should be training. Makes sense to me. Ted, what about you? Where did everybody find you at?
Ted_Summers, Torchlight K9, letter K number 9, Torchlight Pets. If you want to see us training we had a tiny Aussie come in and it was a biter.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, and I think there's a video of it biting me, or trying to. I don't know if they put that up or not. It was pretty funny. And then Oil Capital Canine Fund is the new 501 for Oklahoma, and then of course HRD Police Canine. So HRD, it's on Facebook and Instagram. What about you?
Van S K9 on Instagram. It's Van S K9 Academy on Facebook, but it's all combined, so it's the same thing. WorkingDogRadio.com. We have shirts and all kinds of stuff on there, and then my new Tap Daddy BJJ Instagram page I'm still working on a bunch of different logos for some shirts and things like that for us older jiu-jitsu practitioners. But I do got stickers in. If you want some, hit me up on Van S K9. I'll mail them to you. See, look at that. If you go to YouTube, you can check it out. But it's been pretty funny. I've handed them out. When I was in Alabama, I went to a gym and just handed a bunch of them out to guys while I was doing drilling. But DJ, I'm glad we had you on, man. Like I said, the ad hits. It's just we just try to keep it short. And I was like, nah, we need more. We need a lot more.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on again, and hopefully I can make arrangements where maybe we can get out and see you guys and actually do some training together. You know, it's one thing to talk about this stuff, but really you're gonna see it. You know, the processes and have more clarity and actually doing some training.
Yeah.
So.
All right, man. Well, guys, thanks for listening, and we will see you at Hold the Line. This will come out, I think, while we're there, actually. So
yeah,
it's not not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday. So this will come out, and then we'll be loading up more episodes while we're there.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
You got your reasons, I got my wants. Still got that feeling, but I'm too old to die young now.
Working Dog Radio was graciously granted permission to use this music by Brother Deeg. Be sure to check him out at brotherdeeg.blogspot.com. That's spelled brotherdege.blogspot.com. Be sure to buy him a beer at Amazon, iTunes, or CD Baby, or anywhere you stream your music. Working Dog Radio was edited and co-produced by Alicia Brandt.